Hey! Okay. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Factual Fridays. We are continuing what we started last Friday with the childhood trauma. We watched a mirror last Friday, and that's as far as we've gotten. So we've got quite a few more that we're going to be going over this time. So let's get into it. Present, share screen.
So an addiction is a complex psychological physiological process, but which manifests in any behavior that a person enjoys, finds relief in, and therefore craves in the short term, but suffers negative consequences in the long term and doesn't give up despite the negative consequences. So craving pleasure, relief in the short term, negative consequences in the long term, inability to give it up. Now, notice I has said nothing about substances. I said any behavior. So it could be related to cocaine, crystal meth, heroin, fentanyl, marijuana, nicotine, alcohol, whatever. Could also be sex, gambling, internet, relationships, shopping, eating, work, extreme sports, working out, pornography, any number of human activities. So I said any behavior. Now, the official definition of addiction, according to the American Society for Addiction Medicine, is that this is it's a primary brain disorder. It arises in the brain, largely due to genetic reasons. This is how they see it, and I say that's just not true. The other popular idea about addiction is that it's a choice that somebody makes, that people choose to be addicted, which is what the legal system is based on. Because if people are not choosing, what are we punishing them for? And although I think the medical definition is closer to the truth, I don't see it as genetic. It's a genetic disorder, and I don't see it as a primary brain disorder. So let me perhaps show you why, if that's okay. A human being has two fundamental needs, apart from the physical needs, in infancy, in childhood. One is for attachment. Now, attachment is the closeness and proximity with another human being for the sake of being looked after, or for the sake of looking after the other. Now, human beings, as mammals and even birds, are creatures of attachment. We have to connect and attach because otherwise we don't survive. If there's nobody that's motivated to take care of us, to attach to us that way, and we're not motivated to attach to others, we just can't survive. One interesting thing is that the endorphins, which are the body's internal opiate chemicals, which heroin and all the other opiates resemble, they help to facilitate attachment. So if you take infant mice and you knock out their endorphin receptors so they don't have endorphin opiate activity in their brain, they won't cry for help and separate from their mothers, which would mean that they would die in the wild. And which goes back to what happens in childhood when there's stress and trauma, these endorphin systems don't develop. And then when people do heroin, it feels like a warm, soft hug to them. They feel love and connection for the first time. That's why it's so powerful. But so we have this need for attachment, without which obviously the human.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I just had to stop it there. Now, I mean, understanding that nice warm hug and embrace that the opioids and heroin do. I mean, that's why the people crave it so much. Is that they never got it as kids, and they're seeking that. They want more. I mean,
It makes sense.
it does, yeah, for sure. I can see why a lot of people would be like that, for sure.
For me, when I started taking painkillers, it was the only thing that, I had been in pain, like all kinds of different kinds of pain for so long that it it was just really nice to not be in pain. But one of
Yes.
the first things that I do remember from the first time that I ever took a painkiller was that nice, warm, fuzzy feeling. Like that's like the first thing that I remember. I remember exactly that day. It felt like my favorite kind of day, like the perfect kind of summer day. It was like late spring, and it was just warm enough, and yeah, it just felt like basking in the sunlight.
Yep.
And I remember very very distinctly because I remember watching a movie called Pootie Tang, and it was about this black guy. I think he was raised by an Asian, and he had like this magical belt that he could like whip people with. I don't know. And Wanda Sykes played in it too, but it was like
Interesting.
I was out of it. I was so out of it.
And I mean, I know that your mother wasn't a real hug kissy type,
No,
so you never really got that
no,
affection.
absolutely not. And I mean, even if it was a hug, it was just like a very quick, kind of more of an acknowledgement,
Yes.
But yeah, no, not not a lot of that. When I was really young, she used to kind of like play with my hair or like go through like the petting thing, and I remember like craving more of that, but
Um,
it stopped. So what happened?
I don't know. The screen went like black for a second, but it's fine.
Don't tell me that. But yeah, it was yeah, that makes sense.
It does for sure.
Warm, fuzzy feeling.
I know, and that's what I was saying though. It's like with you again, you did not have that from parents,
No.
so you're gonna try to seek it elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I mean that makes a lot of sense for some of the people. I mean, we've watched the Teen Moms,
Right.
and a lot of them, like Janelle.
Yeah, she has no. She's got her mother's very very prickly, so she's got no soft place to fall.
Exactly. So I mean that makes a lot of sense as to why somebody would go that route.
Yeah.
But then it doesn't take long for that substance to ruin your life either.
No. No, your mother was pretty, kind of overly affectionate, in my opinion. So I'm not entirely sure what it was you were seeking.
I was just over like attention seeking, like not necessarily attention, but it was like I had to have the
Mm, validation.
yeah validation and everything, and I had to be like, okay, you're doing good, you're doing good,
It drives me crazy.
yeah.
But I understand it, but it still drives me crazy. It's like, God damn it, you should be secure in that.
Well, exactly, you should. And that's part of the problem. You have to stand up to a lot of different things, and especially like somebody like me needs to stand up to his masculinity and understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're the life that I had, I didn't really have that masculinity
No, like I said,
shown.
we're like we talked about last time. We're completely polarized. I'm like very hard and really practical about things, and you're a little bit more softer and more sensitive, easily wounded.
Yes,
And it's like that. It comes in handy, but like because we kind of balance each other out. I mean, it was necessary for survival up until this point, but it's just not good for you on the long term.
exactly.
Like I can't handle it for a long period of time without having to break down and shutting down and being
Yeah,
like, I just can't go on, and you can't. It's the same thing for you. You just can't like wallow in that forever. So it's like it's just not how we're designed
no.
biologically. We can't keep it up forever. You
I mean, that's why our life got so bad when you were going to your mother's all the time too.
Right.
Because again, I was here by myself,
Right.
and I couldn't handle it.
And it's like I started having to make my own money and do the webcamming and running like my own work that way
Yeah,
because I felt like I just didn't feel secure. So it's just like you can't biologically we're proof that you just can't keep it up that way.
exactly.
And it's all stemming from childhood trauma. It's all just like the shit
Yeah.
that was done to us.
You were raised by a single mother. Really didn't know a father. I mean, you did for a little bit, but not really.
Yeah, no, not really. Not really.
Me,
Because it was still limited even when he was there. So
yeah,
and you were raised pretty much by
by
a
a single
single
mother,
mother. Yeah.
myself, and
And it's the same thing. It makes like feminine men and masculine women. It does
yeah,
every time.
exactly. It's a complete polar of opposite of what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
infant, who's the most helpless, the most dependent, the least mature of any creature in the universe at birth, uh, cannot survive without the attachment. And that attachment relationship, given that we have the longest period of development of any creature, well into adolescence and beyond, attachment is not a negotiable need. But we have another need, which is authenticity. Now, authenticity, auto the self, means being connected to ourselves, just knowing what we feel and being able to act on it. So that means our gut feelings. So let's look at how human beings evolved. For hundreds of thousands of years, and for 100,000 years or so of this species existing on Earth, how did we live? We didn't live in cities and houses and so on. We lived out there in the wild until very recently in human existence. Now, just how long do you survive in the wild if you're not connected to your gut feelings? Not very long. If you start using your intellect instead of your gut feelings, you just don't survive. So that's a powerful survival need as well. So attachment is a survival need. Authenticity is a survival need. But what happens if your authenticity threatens your attachment relationships? For example, as a 2-year-old, you get angry because you didn't get that cookie before dinner. But your parents can't handle anger because they grew up in homes when there was rageaholism and they're terrified at the very expression of anger. So they give you the message that good little kids don't get angry. The message you receive is not that good little kids don't get angry, but that angry little kids don't get loved. Because your parents are now sullen, they won't look at you, they talk to you in a harsh way, you're not getting loved. Not experiencing love at that moment. No, but you got to stay attached. Guess what you're going to suppress? The authenticity every time. And this is how we lose connection to ourselves and to our gut feelings. So that, strangely enough, that very dynamic, which is essential for human survival in a natural state.
Okay.
That's what basically what I'm talking about. Like in a natural state, our authenticity, it's like, as a biological principle, woman is not supposed to, meant to be hardened and
Yes.
capable of carrying everything and doing everything, because that's not her authentic self, and it's not your authentic self to be like the softer, more, you know, I don't know, the weaker one.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
it's not your authentic self. It's just completely against nature. It's completely against biology. So when we have the attachment, like for me to please my mother, I had to suppress my authentic self by saying, "Oh no, I don't need a man. I don't want children.
Yeah.
I can do everything myself," and that just wasn't true.
Exactly.
And there
That.
was like parts of me that knew that, because from time to time I would say that, particularly
Yeah, you would.
when you and I were separated. I was like, why should I? Like, I watched you go through this stuff. I watched the problems that happen. Why? Just because I can doesn't mean I should have to.
Yeah.
So I did know that, and I voiced it from time to time, but it was beaten down pretty quick.
Oh, I know. No, your mother was bad with all that. I mean,
Right.
she really made sure that.
And for your mother, she was telling you, it's like, oh well, just find somebody that makes you happy. Find somebody who's not going to challenge you, who's not going to be violent with you. It's like,
And
just,
yeah,
and it's like.
And ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you for sure, happiness is fleeting. You need joy in your life, not happiness. Joy is something that, like Nefer just said, somebody who does challenge you, somebody who makes you a better person.
And if it's violence, I mean, violence is not good, but you got to find the root cause of that and find out, like,
Yes.
you've got to work through that. I mean, if it's like straight up abuse, that's a different story. But if there's like passionate violence, then
There's a reason.
There's something behind that.
So you got to figure that reason out and work it out.
And it's unfortunate that it happens when it happens.
Yes.
Like avoiding it altogether is never going to get you anywhere, because that's
No.
not the world that we live in.
Exactly.
It is harsh.
Yes, it is. It's very harsh.
And in order for me to be able to provide that peace and pleasure and softness for you, you have to step up and take that.
Exactly. I had to do a lot of that and a lot of and a lot of researching and finding out who I am. And we had to do a lot of work together. And your mother was sabotaging that to begin with.
Setting. not becomes a threat to our survival in this more modern setting, where to stay authentic is to threaten attachment. And so we give up our authenticity, and then we wonder who the hell we are and whose life is this and who's experiencing all this. And this life doesn't, and who am I really? And so that's where the reconnection has to happen. That's where the healing happens, is with that reconnection. But it's because of that conflict, that tragic conflict in childhood between authenticity and attachment that most of us face, that we lose ourselves and lose connection to our gut feelings. Now, this leads to the question of trauma, because it's one thing to recognize that all this originates in childhood pain. It's quite another to transform that pain. And for that, we have to understand what trauma is. So people often think that trauma is what happens to you. So trauma is a divorce when you were small and your parents fighting. Trauma is your mother's depression. Trauma is your father's alcoholism. Trauma is your parents' argumentation. Trauma is physical or sexual abuse or some loss. Those aren't the traumas. Those are traumatic. But the trauma is not what happens to you. The trauma is what happens inside you. And as a result of these traumatic events, what happens inside you is you get disconnected from your emotions, and you're disconnected from your body, and you have difficulty being in the present moment, and you develop a negative view of your world, and a negative view of yourself, and a defensive view of other people. And these perspectives keep showing up in your life in the present. So in other words, the addiction is not the primary problem. It's an attempt to solve a problem. And then the real question is, how did the problem arise? In other words, this is where my theory is, that it's always rooted in childhood trauma, and that the addiction is an attempt to deal with the effects of childhood trauma, which it does temporarily, while it creates even more problems in the long term. And so the issue is not just to recognize what happened 10, 15, 30, however many years ago, but to actually recognize the manifestations in the present moment and to transcend them. And how do you do that? By reconnecting with yourself, by restoring the connection with your body primarily and with your emotions that you lost. And once you do, when you found these things again, then you have what we call recovery. Because what does it mean to recover something? It means to find it again. So what is it that people find when they recover? They find themselves. And the loss of self is the essence of trauma. So the real purpose of addiction treatment, mental health treatment, any kind of healing is reconnection.
Our brains are wired for connection, but trauma rewires them for protection.
All right, the next one that we're going on to is 4 types of traumas and how it affects your relationship. Now, that should be a very good one. We already went over some stuff as far as, traumas and interfering with lives and stuff like in our own. So, ladies and gentlemen, if anybody's here or if you're watching this later, please let us know. Have your relationships been messed up? Have you had issues with finding yourself or with addiction or being told that you're wrong or whatever that might be? Let us know either in the comments or on the live chat.
It's kind of remarkable the amount of comments that I see that they mirror our
Yeah.
own narcissistic experiences with parents and adults in their lives. I
Yeah.
think it's freaking crazy.
It very much is, yes. All right, let's move on to the next one.
That's why healthy relationships are difficult for wounded people. Do these words speak to you? Trauma can come from many difficult sources, and sometimes this includes those closest to you, your family. Negative experiences you had growing up, or even heavy responsibilities and expectations placed on you throughout your childhood can often.
All right, it was showing the whole fighting thing, and I just had to share. I think I already did share this at some point. I don't remember with what, or if it was the last one.
You gotta lower your voice a little bit.
Okay, if it was the last one or not, but my issues growing up, like with my mother and stuff, she was, in AA recovering and all of that. She, with everything that they say that goes along with it, as Nefra was saying, it's, they're always recovering. They're always going through this. They have to go through like meeting after meeting after meeting and just keep going because so that it doesn't come back. And it's like at some point
Something's missing.
at some point you've got to really look at it and be like, okay, why is it coming back? And like look inside yourself. And that's something that it doesn't teach, is to look within yourself and truly find the core problems. It's like when I was a younger kid, my mother would like go to her meetings and I'd be bawling my eyes out, like trying to figure out why they're leaving, why this or that, but she had to go. I mean, that was just some of the what I had to deal with because of her, traumas.
And honestly, I don't understand how any mother can have anything else be a better reason for cleaning up and doing what's right besides their children. The children
Yes,
should literally be the only thing that they need. I mean, that's exactly what it was for me.
I know.
Even this last time, even though, cannabis is legal here, I stopped smoking just because I didn't want to have that chance of anything. And it's like
Of them, yeah,
I smoked every day for 8 years and then just stopped.
yeah,
You
and
know,
no issues.
when he was born, I had been taking opiates for several years at that point, and for 3 months I just stopped.
Yeah,
It's like that's enough. It
it,
should
it
be
should be
enough.
enough. Yes,
And it's like if anything would have come of it, I would never have taken another painkiller again. I never would have drank again.
exactly. And I mean, we switched our lives for our firstborn Tristan. We switched them around
That was the
completely.
whole point.
Yeah.
He was the one that started that.
Yes.
It's like, I just don't understand how it could be. Why do you need an external thing? Anything else besides that?
Exactly. I mean, that's big, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, it really is.
I don't know what the news doctor said.
Often be too difficult to forget. Psychologists call these adverse childhood experiences, potentially traumatic events that can happen from a child's birth until they reach adulthood. According to Centers for Disease and Prevention, these events are linked to chronic health problems, mental illnesses, and substance use problems in adolescence and adulthood. So even as you grow up and replace the family you were born into with the family you choose for yourself, it's still hard to let go of the trauma. It seems as if the ghosts of your past come alive and try to make it all about them once again. And even if you know in your heart that your partner is not the parent who hurt you, it may not help. What kinds of trauma can one experience through their lives, and how do these traumas impact their romantic relationships? Let's explore 4 types of trauma and their effects on your romantic life. Rejection trauma. Let's start with the trauma of being rejected. Rejection trauma is born in a home where we're made to feel like we don't matter. Try to think back into your childhood. Were you always pushed away? Do you feel like you're not worthy of your parents' time? If instead of love and warmth you felt rejected, you may have carried that feeling with you. And today, you might find yourself fearing rejection all over again. Only this time you may feel rejected by your romantic partner. A 2015 research paper published in Dialogues in Clinical Neuroscience examined emotions that occur when people perceive rejection in their relationships. According to researchers, rejection trauma could make you feel hurt, jealous, lonely, ashamed, guilty, socially anxious, and embarrassed. All of these emotions can later negatively impact your relationship and your self-esteem within that relationship. For example, psychotherapist Amy
Always afraid of looking too.
Yeah.
But I tried to reject it. I tried to reject it. And you won't take it.
No, I wouldn't. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now with me, the relationship that I had before I got with my awesome wife here was a relationship that was just all bad. The woman cheated on me multiple times. She would just split up for a minute, go cheat, and then come back. And it was like, I mean, I honestly was not ready for any relationship, but it was, the last year of high school, and it was just one of those things. Oh, you're going to date her. Oh, it's what you're supposed to do, type of thing. And it was just, oh, it's like I'm not gonna find anybody else. And
you did deal with a lot of that with the.
yeah,
I mean, with good reason. No, I mean, when she would sit on other people's laps right in front of you. She would
yes,
be like, she would. I mean, I know she used to like rub her boobs on people's backs and stuff, acting like she was just like having fun and everything. But I mean, even that guy was like, "Dude, you have a boyfriend. Stop."
I know.
You know,
No,
even he
yeah,
had more like decorum than she did. So
he was also gay.
I know, right? Within good reason, did you have these jealousy things? They were
Yes,
just telling you something. It still springs up sometimes within our relationship, and it's like it's fine. I don't mind. It's like a possessiveness, which is normal and natural because you're supposed to be possessive of things that are yours.
yes.
You want to protect them. It's like that's fine. It's not like in an unhealthy way. I don't feel.
No, she tried to say that I was in an unhealthy way that way.
No, and then I would watch them. I watched really carefully, and it was her. It was her that was being really weird and crazy.
Yes.
And it was like she was forcing your hand on that one. That was not good. It was very toxic. She would dress a certain way and act a certain way, and it was like I don't know what the game was, but
No, but if I would have still been in that, like, not necessarily, I would have been long dead right now.
yeah, I agree.
But if I was still in it then, I mean, I was so tense even then.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. Even with all of our stresses that we have, our day-to-day survival stresses, nothing's come close.
No, it hasn't, not at all.
But did you have that sense of rejection when you were younger?
Well,
It just didn't matter.
Oh yeah, of course, because my mother going to those meetings, and it's
Right,
like,
she chose the meeting as
yeah,
a video. The story about how you were like left in that room and they made fun of you for having like separation anxiety.
yes.
And it's like
I mean, I one of the houses that we lived in had a glass door, and it was like I would have to have eyes on it to know that somebody was there in the living room when I was going to bed. Like, okay, you better be there. I mean, it was that bad.
and I always just kind of felt like I mean I still feel that way, that it was just kind of like you were just kind of like, oh shit, I mean now you're here, what am I gonna do about it, and you're just kind of there.
Yeah,
Not like you were really welcome, and not really like you were like thought of, you're just there to be
yeah.
dealt with. I still feel that way. It's like, I mean, I don't think you were planned for one thing, and I don't think you were really. I just don't feel like you were welcome. I don't know.
I know.
It's kind of a weird situation. And so yeah, definitely like your separation anxiety has come into play here a few times, and I don't understand it because I'm again the exact opposite.
I know exactly. I mean, that's the big thing. That's you don't understand it, and
And you'll never understand my wariness of people and not wanting to be around them.
exactly.
We were literally put here to help work through those things.
And
Opposite ends of the spectrum.
I would say that we're doing a damn good job of it.
Amy Morin said for Very Well Mind that people who went through rejection trauma may interpret rejection as proof that they are unacceptable in some way. If your partner is too busy to spend time with you or doesn't reply to your message right away, you may say to yourself, yep, I knew it. They don't care about me. Do you sometimes think like this in similar situations? The reality might be, and often is, completely different. but you still may perceive it as rejection and take it personally. Maybe you believe that you only matter if you're accepted by others, or you might struggle with constant fears and worries, expecting rejection to inevitably happen. Abandonment trauma. Hand in hand with rejection often comes abandonment. As children, we depend on our parents to feel safe and be safe. But in some cases, our parents make the world feel unstable and dangerous. Have you experienced some kind of neglect or abuse that made you feel unsafe at home? Maybe it was a lack of supervision, physical and narcissistic abuse, or staying hungry all the time because you weren't given anything to eat. When a child goes through these experiences, they can't really understand why these things are happening, and often they can explain this.
Okay.
I can definitely resonate with the abandonment issues because my father left when I was 7 days old, and then he was in and out of my life until I was like 7 months old, and then he went out for good and never saw him again.
Yeah, and then you found out that he was dead, and that day hit you hard.
Yeah, I did, because it was like, okay, we'll never understand if it was him that chose to stay away, if it was my mother that ran him off, and more,
Yes.
I'm more inclined to think that it was just her running him off and him just not wanting to deal with it. And in some ways, my mother abandoned me in ways because I was left alone a lot.
Mhm.
I understand how that goes too.
Yeah, I was the same way. I was left alone a lot. I mean, it's crazy, ladies and gentlemen, that I was left. Okay, there was a house in Sacramento that they put my grandmother in a nursing home 4 blocks away with Alzheimer's. She did not understand why she could not go home, and she would get out of the nursing home and come over. Now my mom and I staying there. I'd get home from school and have to hide under a coffee table watching TV, just so that she wouldn't see me because she'd be over knocking on the windows and trying to get into the doors. And I mean, I was like maybe probably 6 or 7 years old. Imagine a 6 or 7 year old home alone. Well, that's going on.
Yeah, for me, it was like I was left alone a lot to like take care of the animals and stuff. And I have to say that anytime that if anything happened, if I called, my mother would be home pretty damn quick, except for one
Yes.
time. Which I'll never understand. But yeah, like your dad, he left when you were really young too.
Yeah, he did.
So
And I lived on Sesame Street.
fatherlessness was a big issue for both of us. But yeah, abandonment, but not necessarily in the way they're describing it. I don't think. But like I said, I've adapted to things differently.
Yeah.
So I might not see it the same way, but yeah. There was times that like I too had to hide because my mother had like dealt with people like either through home health or she was giving them medications and trading medications and stuff, and so they would come looking for her and going around the house, and I'd have to sit by the door, wait for them to go away, and sometimes they wouldn't go away for a really long time.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel safe with that. Sometimes we had a couple people working for us that came right up to the door, but I had dogs.
I was gonna say you had some pretty good security though.
And I think that was the big difference in that because I always had the animals that were looking out and like trained to protect. So
Yes.
big difference. But,
Oh yeah, there's a big difference there.
so,
Yes.
I don't think that's where that part bothers me so much. But as far as like people leaving, yeah, because even in more recent years, within the past 5 years, my mother just
Up and left.
and left and
Yes.
never ever came back. So it's like that. In that sense, I understand.
She is just like, you think you're better?
Then that's it.
Yeah, it's
And
like
it was
whatever.
and we had a really great conversation until like 2 o'clock in the morning. And when she brought me back from the fireworks, and then like I thought we were on good terms, and I never talked to her again.
You did once.
Over text.
Yeah, over text, not
Yes.
not voice. No.
Yeah, so as of like July 6th, uh, uh, this year it'll be like five.
Yeah.
6 years.
6 years.
6 years because it's 2019. But yeah, I honestly I did not see it coming. I didn't see it coming. It was just like everything was good, everything was fine. I thought we were on the same page, on good terms.
Yes.
So yeah, that's where my abandonment issue comes in, because it's like, well,
Very
shit,
much so. I see
even
that.
even
Yes,
if everything seems like it's going okay, is it? You know,
I know.
because what the fuck? You know, they just what the hell?
I
You
know.
know, what the oh god.
You don't have to worry about me though.
No, because you have a different
I'm just-
attachment issue.
I'm just the pain in your thorn that won't go away.
You want to call him my side, even?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
pain in your thorn.
It's alright.
This only by believing that they don't actually deserve any attention or care. They start to believe that the world is not worthy of their trust, while they aren't worthy of the world. They feel abandoned. Abandonment trauma often leads to formation of an anxious attachment style. A 2017 study published in Current Opinion in Psychology found that individuals with an anxious attachment style may be hypervigilant and worry about their worthiness in a relationship and their partner's desire to be with them. And in some cases, severe trauma can even cause the development of personality disorders such as borderline personality disorder. Psychiatrist Mark Zimmerman wrote for MSD Manual that fear of abandonment is a common symptom of borderline personality disorder. Even if you don't suffer from BPD, you could still feel the same mix of emotions when you feel abandoned by your partner: anger, anxiousness, and fear. You might react intensely, acting jealous and possessive, or crying your heart out, because all you know is that you can't stand the thought of being alone again. Betrayal trauma. Maybe the worst thing about these childhood wounds is the fact that they were brought to us by the people we trusted. People who were supposed to love us more than the world, people who were supposed to be our superheroes. Suffering trauma by someone you are close to and depend on for support and survival is defined as betrayal trauma. Have you been deeply betrayed by someone you loved and depended on? This could mean discovering that one of your parents or your partner cheated, family members justifying abusive behavior, or maybe one or both of your parents engaging in drinking or gambling instead of providing for you. If things like these happen to a child, they might have trouble accepting it or believing it, so they often just suppress it. One study from 2009 published in the American Journal of Psychology suggests that those who suffer from betrayal trauma often dissociate traumatic experiences from conscious awareness in order to preserve the relationship. It's because they're too dependent on their abuser to believe otherwise. And once they grow up, they might continue the same patterns. They might become dependent, feel inadequate to be on their own, and decide to stay in toxic relationships. They might be too afraid to leave, too afraid to be betrayed again, so they just put on a happy mask and suffer in silence. Humiliation trauma. Lastly, your childhood may have left you with a wound of toxic shame. Humiliation trauma. Was there a time when your parents made you feel deeply ashamed of yourself? They might have laughed at you for changing body during puberty or mocked you for not getting the highest grade in school. In order to survive feeling ashamed and humiliated, you might have developed some coping mechanisms that you still use to this day. Dr. Linda Hartling said for modernintimacy.com that there are 3 strategies that you might use as a way of dealing with toxic shame from your childhood: moving away, moving toward, or moving against shame. Moving away from shame means isolating, keeping secrets, or withdrawing from your partner. Moving toward shame could show up as codependency or people-pleasing behavior, becoming what you think your partner wants you to be, even if it means losing your sense of self. And when you move against shame, you might try to fight those who shame you. Maybe you use passive aggression or insults to shame your partner before they get the chance to shame you. These strategies might help you cope, but they might be detrimental to your relationships in the long run. Do you feel like some of these trauma types describe you and your relationship patterns? Have you recognized some other childhood wounds that get in the way of a fulfilling love life? Unfortunately, sometimes we may unconsciously seek partners who imitate those who hurt us. Later on, this can lead to trauma bonds within a relationship. Are you stuck in a trauma bond? Take a look at this video and find out if it's a trauma bond or love. Don't forget, you matter. Thanks for watching. Until next time.
The attachment theory argues that a strong emotional and
Alright, so that's the second one. I believe this next one The attachment theory.
Hold on, they were talking about like betrayal and humiliation, right?
Yeah.
Betrayal, I absolutely understand. And the humiliation one, went you through to some degree, but I think more or less of how they tried to literally shame you out of the behaviors that you were
I know.
experiencing, and they were the cause of it.
Yes. I know, and that's just it, and that's a lot of what happened to me as a child, because I think about, the being going nuts that my mother was leaving and going to the meetings instead of taking care of yeah.
Time and it's and like I don't understand it. I've never understood it. Like when children have like their first loves, or they're starting to interest in like boys being interested in girls or whatever.
Yes.
And they go and they make fun of it.
Oh, I know.
And
yeah,
it's
that's
like, oh god, you got a little girlfriend, and they do this stupid shit. And then they wonder why they don't want to talk about it later on.
Well, it's because most generally that's what happened to them. And so it's what they know, and they just people are very, very stuck on familiarity. That word.
Yeah.
They're stuck on that. So it's like if that was done to them, more than likely that they're going to do it to their kids.
The shame thing is why I refuse to do that. I even knew it then.
Yeah.
I stick to it now. It's like I will not do that.
I know.
Because it's like, dude, what the hell?
Yeah.
And like the shame thing for me, it was more of a posturing thing, I guess, because like my mother would act one way around me and say these things, and like my weight, for instance, I was like thicker when I was a teenager. And she would be like just talking about, she's like, oh well, you're just strong, you're just like stout, you're made for fighting, and everything.
Yeah.
But then she'd get around my grandmother and say these horrible
Yeah.
things. I had this little trick that I could do, standing up on my toes, like all the way up on my toes, kind of like on Titanic, how she
Yeah.
stood on the toes. And I did that, and I was like trying to impress them with it. And she goes, "It's amazing she could do that with all that extra weight, right?" And I was like,
Yeah,
that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and it's like, what about my skin? It was like she wouldn't say anything in private, but then being out in public, she'd talk about like how my skin was really bad and stuff.
Well, that's another trauma response type of a situation too. They're bringing up things about you so that things about them don't get brought up.
Yeah, it's true. It's like it's like the way that my grandmother talked, and still obviously does. She like hung the moon and walks on water.
Yeah, I know.
Even though she took like $55,000 of their money.
Well, yeah. Well, look what your grandmother had to do too. Give up kids and
That's true.
everything else just for the sake of her husband.
But my mother hates her, and
I know.
it's a well-known fact that she hates her.
Yeah.
And
But your grandmother's trying to get back on her good side regardless.
there's no good side.
There isn't, no. But, she's still trying.
And she'll say these things, like, again, behind her back, but in her presence, it's
Yeah.
like, she's the one that gets the truck, she's the one that gets the trailer, she got her property.
And you're the one that did everything when your grandfather passed away.
Yeah.
Bank accounts, all of that.
All the CDs, all of it. All of it.
Yeah.
I called the people.
Exactly.
All of her friends to let them know, it's like I had to go through that story over and over.
We
and
both
over
went
again.
and got his ashes from.
Yeah. But she's the one.
Yeah.
That gets everything, gets all the recognition, gets all of the stuff. I mean, they helped me buy this place, but I paid for it for 4 years.
Yeah.
My mother got a house that was $30,000 more and didn't have to pay a single thing.
Exactly.
And she got a $37,000 truck.
It was supposed to be yours originally.
And, it's like, okay, I got the fence done, but that was put into the price of my.
And there's supposed to be a lot more that we didn't get done.
Yeah, and it's like, what the hell?
I don't know. I mean, that's just your family's on the screwed up side for all of that. Like,
it's just, malicious.
Yes.
So mean. Like at least with your family, it's just benign neglect.
Yeah.
But mine seeks to destroy. Holy shit. I don't know, man. Damaging.
It is.
But it's like at least you don't live in fear of
Yeah.
what they're gonna do next.
Hey, I lived in fear of your mother. I thought she was gonna.
My mother. Yeah.
I thought she was gonna run me over several times.
Oh, I did that, but not. You don't fear. You don't have
No.
fear of your side of
No.
the family, right? It's just like the worst that they'll do is just stop.
Yeah.
That's like. When you've been through that already, what's the worst that could happen?
And my side's pretty much all the left leaning
I know. I know.
side. Like, wow.
It is in a pretty extreme way now.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, geez, they weren't like that before. What
No.
the hell has happened?
I have no idea there.
Ah,
All right, let's get on with this next one. It's one you picked, right?
I don't know.
It's the attachment theory.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even get to finish watching it.
And physical bond to one primary caregiver in our first years of life is critical to our development. If our bonding is strong and we are securely attached, then we feel safe to explore the world. We know that there is always that safe base which we can return to any time. If our bond is weak, we feel insecurely attached. We are afraid to leave or explore a rather scary-looking world because we are not sure if we can return. People who are securely attached are said to have greater trust, can connect to others, and as a result are more successful in life. Insecurely attached people tend to mistrust others, lack social skills, and have problems forming relationships. There is one type of secure attachment, and there are 3 types of insecure attachments: anxious ambivalent, anxious avoidant, and anxious disorganized. In responses to distress, the first 3 react organized, while the last acts disorganized. To understand the theory better, let's look at Mr. and Mrs. Smith, who have 4 children: Luca, Anne, Joe, and Amy. The Smiths are lovely parents who cuddle, make frequent eye contact, speak warmly, and are always there for their kids. But one day, Mr. Smith falls very sick and dies. For Mrs. Smith, life now becomes very difficult. She spends all day working, while at the same time trying to care for her children. An impossible task. At 6 years of age, Luca's brain is for the most part developed, his character strong and his worldview shaped. The new situation does not affect him much. He knows there is still always Mum, his safe haven. He feels securely attached. Later, he turns into a trusting and optimistic young man. His self-image is positive. Anne, who is 3, has problems coping with the new lack of attention. To Anne, her mother now acts unpredictably. She is anxious about their relationship and as a result becomes clingy. To get her mum's attention, she has to raise her emotional state and scream. When her mum finally reacts with a predictable response, she herself acts ambivalent and doesn't show her true feelings. Later in life, others think Anne is unpredictable or moody. Her self-image is less positive. Her attachment style is anxious ambivalent. 2-year-old Joe spends his days with his uncle, who loves him, but thinks that a good education means being strict. If little Joe shows too much emotion or is too loud, his uncle gets angry and sometimes punitive. This scares Joe. He learns that to avoid fear, he has to avoid showing his feelings, also in other situations. As an adult, he continues this strategy and has problems entering relationships. His image of himself is rather negative. His attachment is anxious avoidant. Amy, who is just 1 year old, gets sent to a nursery. The staff there is poorly trained, overworked, and often very stressed. Some are outright abusive. Amy therefore becomes anxious of the very people she seeks security from, a conflict which totally disorganizes her ideas about love and safety. As she is experiencing fear without resolution, she tries to avoid all social situations. As an adult, she thinks of herself as unworthy of love. Her self-image is very negative. Her attachment is anxious, disorganized. Our attachment is formed in the very first years of our lives, a time when we are too young to communicate our anxiety and as a result can experience high levels of stress. Then our adrenal gland, an organ sitting on top of our kidneys, produces the stress hormones adrenaline and cortisol. The heart rate increases, the blood pressure goes up, and we become alert. If that happens frequently, it is called toxic stress. Toxic because it impairs the development of a child's brain and weakens the immune system. In embryos or at a very young age, toxic stress can even switch the expressions of genes, which can affect our health many decades later. By simulating a strange situation, we can assess an attachment style already by the age of 1. To do this, we let the child play with their mother for a few minutes inside a room. Then the child is left alone. The key moment is the child's reaction when her mother returns. Securely attached children first usually hug their mother, then can calm down and eventually get back to playing. Insecurely attached children can be ambivalent and avoidant. Some can't stop crying or refuse to continue playing. The long-term effects of our attachment in the early years are well documented. Using the theory, researchers at Minnesota University were able to predict already at age 3 if a child would drop out of high school with 77% accuracy. In another study, undergraduates at Harvard were asked to assess how close they felt to their parents. 35 years later, they were asked about their health. 91% of those who said they had a rather broken relationship with their mother were also diagnosed with health issues, including coronary artery disease, hypertension, and alcoholism. For those that had reported a warm relationship, the figure of poor health diagnosis was just 45%. But there is another reason why the early years deserve special attention. They are the starting place for subsequent behaviors. A kid that feels securely attached at age 2 can make friends at kindergarten. Their worldview gets reinforced with every interaction, and they develop optimism. As a result, they make good relationships at school, then at college, and later at work. Highly insecurely attached children can miss out on this opportunity. Psychologist John Bowlby, a pioneer in attachment theory, allegedly said, "What cannot be communicated to the mother cannot be communicated to the self." In other words, those who feel insecurely attached might not quite understand themselves. To get to know who they are and what they feel, they might have to go way back in time.
I've been wanting to do a video like this for a while. Check out this picture. Here is actually looking at a family system.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna do this video as a closing out video for this one. There's 2 others, but this one fits more because it's about not being able to remember the traumas and why it does that and stuff. And I mean, that's a lot of what happened to me. Is I got a lot of blocked memory.
It drives me crazy. It hurts me so bad because he can't remember like anything.
Yeah.
I can remember everything, every detail, and it's like when you have these big gaps,
Yeah.
like for years, that's just like that scares the hell out of me.
I know it does. Yes.
And it's like, I mean, I don't know like what's like worse, but I'm just saying that like that would drive me absolutely.
Oh yeah.
That would drive me crazy not to be able to remember at least, you know.
Yeah.
Because you can't change what you don't acknowledge, like Dr. Phil says. So,
exactly. And so if you can't acknowledge it, then
how
we're just
can you change it?
Exactly.
because it's something buried there that you're still physiologically responding to, but you
Yes,
don't know why.
exactly. That's just it. And so we're gonna play this one and finish it out with this one. I'm sure we'll have more talking points along the way. So
Interesting.
let's get in.
Through something called a genogram. A genogram is a family tree of dysfunction. I have all my clients put one together with me at the beginning of treatment to get a sense about what their childhood or parts of their childhood. And not remembering is super frustrating. There's a deep sense of stuckness for them that is like if you've ever had to sit down and write a story, but you don't have a frame of reference or a place to start. And it feels like you can't figure out where it's going to go since you don't have a beginning. And I tell people that everybody is different. I have clients that range from remembering everything in their childhood to missing huge timelines in their childhood or missing some smaller gaps. But there's something I notice in my work with those who have some memory loss that I'd really like to say to you guys up front. And that what I notice is that survivors of trauma assume that uncovering or finding a lost database of memories is the only way to healing. And until they uncover those things, like they're up the creek, that is so not true. I tell clients that actually you don't need extensive memories to figure out or work on childhood trauma. I also notice that clients with memory issues assume they don't have any real knowledge or awareness about how bad their childhood potentially was, when that's not really true either. You know more than you think, and you might be second guessing your awareness of your own family system. Having awareness of the family system you grew up in is different than unearthing childhood memories, but it's just as helpful, if not more helpful. And the memory issue is not like seeing the forest through the trees. Survivors are often overly focused on the missing details of their childhood and not taking a step back and looking at the whole system that they grew up in. And I'm going to come back to that later in the video. So I've had clients who report they can't remember much, but they can identify present issues in the family, such as having a super difficult or abusive parent in the present, or having siblings who are not doing well emotionally or with intimacy in the present, or family is super enmeshed or estranged in the present, or their parents have like a loveless or conflict-oriented marriage, or worse, a conflict-avoidant kind of marriage, and they have problems of repression in the present, or simply a parent who doesn't engage or refuses to be involved in the family in the present. So some clients can report all that going on in their family system, but they struggle with
And it's crazy, ladies and gentlemen. That's exactly with my parents. The avoidance of intimacy and everything else. I mean, that was identical in the situation because I didn't know them together that long. And so I've always known them separate. My mom's gone through I don't know how many guys that I had seen her with, but still not really you know, you don't. I never really saw the intimacy with any of them.
And if there's one thing that I know about your dad is he is very conflict avoidant.
Yes,
It's like if it makes him slightly uncomfortable at all, we'll talk about something else. We won't act like we even heard you. We'll just
exactly.
like,
Yes,
we'll move on. Oh well, let's hope that that just completely avoids any sort of uncomfortable sort of. So I can imagine that within a marriage, and it's funny you said that that was worse than actually having like a volatile marriage or
yeah.
conflict. It's like
Well, because that's what the kid sees.
I think it was Jordan Peterson who's the only other one that I've ever heard say it like the way that I see it. And thought about like how people don't like to fight in front of the kids and all that.
Yeah.
He said it's not about that. It's about how you end the fight.
Yes,
how
I remember you
how
saying this
you
one.
keep
Yes.
on going after the fight. It's not a problem to fight in front of the kids. That's actually good because that shows them the truth of it. There is conflict.
Yes.
And that conflict can be overcome and it can be worked through. And I was just completely floored. He's the only other psychologist I've ever heard.
Well, yeah, because I mean, if you think about it, parents are gonna fight, and that shows the kids, hey,
People,
yeah, people fight, and it's like if you love somebody, that you will want them to do better, so you will force them to do better.
Right.
And it's
Or
like,
at least very strongly suggest.
yes, but it's like you'll want to see that makeup after though, and that togetherness
knowing
still.
that they're still gonna go to bed together, they're still gonna wake up in the morning, and most of all, they're still gonna be pulling for the same thing for the betterment of the family and the security of the child.
But that intimacy avoidance is very common. I mean, you knew your best friend's parents.
Right. Well, it said I didn't hear about the part of intimacy avoidance. I just heard
Yeah.
about conflict
Yeah.
avoidance.
It was the one right before it.
Uh,
It was the intimacy avoidance.
yeah, see, both of those things.
Yeah.
Like, for me, I was talking about conflict because people do tend to
Yeah.
just shy away from that, and it's like I don't like that.
No.
It's like it's like when you do the same thing, you try to shut down, not talk to me about things, and say that this is making you uncomfortable. I mean, I will try to get it out of you one way or
Yeah.
another. I'll pick at you and pick at you and pick at you and say these things that a normal person would say something back on, and you don't do that, and that's really telling how you were raised.
Exactly, it
It's
is.
like, because that's just not healthy. It's like you've got to tell people, and your toes are going to be stepped on.
Yeah, you do.
Otherwise, they're going to keep doing it. And yes, with the intimacy, yeah, my best friend, it was like they were in a loveless marriage, just completely, like, I mean, they fucking hated each other. Never hug, never kiss, never played around. Like there was like maybe a handful of times, maybe like 3 times that I can remember where her dad actually had fun
Yes.
and like played around and did stuff like that. It was like
Well,
so rare.
from what I saw, he had fun cooking.
He did. And when we were on vacation once, we went to Morro Bay, and we were driving on the beach, and he's like, you know what, I'm gonna do a donut. He's like, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. And the wife was like, no, don't do that. And Kimberly's like, oh no, it says we're gonna flip over because. And so I was videotaping because I videotape everything, and I even videotaped it because it was an SUV.
Yeah.
And it said high chance of rollovers. So I videotaped it before I did it, and he did his donut, and he was smiling away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like that sticks out to me. Other than that,
that's it.
He just tried to fill his time with stuff. He was a big hoarder.
Oh yeah, he was a big hoarder, and hoarding stuff he did not need or have any use for.
He bought
tools, like shovels.
He built a big ass, giant, double-decker red barn for Kimberly and her horses. She only ever had one horse. Well, she had 2 horses, but at separate times. And he literally filled it, every single square
inch of it. Yes.
With stuff.
Yes.
I mean that was killer. I mean, we used to play up in that loft. We used to have all this space. We used to have like a rope that we could swing down on and stuff.
Yeah.
And he just filled it with stuff. Always saying he was gonna sell it later. At some yard sale or some shit, and it just never happened.
Yep.
Yeah, he loved to cook and stuff, but it was just there, and they just look god awful now. They just look so horrible.
They do. I mean, they're drunks too. On top of it all.
They look like walking zombies. It's just horrible. So yeah, conflict should be avoided. Intimacy shouldn't be avoided.
No.
You know, you gotta hit this shit head on.
You do, for sure.
With identifying tangible trauma from their childhood. And in my experience, if those issues that I just mentioned are prevalent in a client's present, then they probably were there in childhood as well, unless the family members went through some heavy duty therapy or the whole family went through some heavy duty therapy. And that is super rare if they did. So all of those present issues are all a client really needs to know to conclude that they probably grew up in some form of childhood trauma. And I tell clients like those present issues are good enough data to work backwards towards childhood to figure out things rather than recall childhood fully. In addition to focusing on the present family system, when clients start working with me, I tell them that their childhood will become more real to them, which happens by talking about the family system in therapy sessions, working backwards by starting with what they do know, like I just mentioned, working with their triggers and their body memories can help figure out that system even more so. Working with our inner child, who often has more access to childhood situations and emotions than our adult self does. And all of that doesn't mean achieving something like full total recall, but these help with not being so dissociated from our story because we never bounced it off somebody or dived deeply into it. And regarding memory issues, clients can have an array of reactions to the therapy that I do, such as some might become more aware of the abusive family, but they don't recall the huge missing chunks of their childhood, and that's actually okay. Some do have intense flashbacks or situations that are new knowledge to them, but that kind of tends to be rare, but it does happen in sessions. For some, the more they talk about and they process with me, the more content comes up as we go along because they're no longer dissociated from their own story. I've had clients in year 3 of working with me talk about situations they've never brought up before. And it's not like a huge revelation to them. They often thought that they did bring it up with me, which makes me wonder, or if it's a sign that they were dissociated from their own story. And some shift out of a vague awareness that the family was really off into having some real mastery over the mess that they grew up in from working backwards with me and starting from what they do know. So in this video, the goal is to not implant memories or suggest things that actually didn't happen, none of that stuff. In therapy, the goal isn't to get really these memories back, actually. The goal is more about educating ourselves on growing up in an unhealthy family system as it relates to our present mental health problems and situations. If you're drawn to my videos on childhood trauma and the dysfunctional family system, you're probably not massively confused about some level of the dysfunction or the abusive system that you grew up in. But if you're just here because you clicked on the title and you feel like you had a pretty good childhood but can't figure out your mental health problems, this video might not be that helpful for you. As a side note, I find that unless the person grew up in, say, something like adoption or foster care or extreme abandonment, most clients are more aware of their family system than they think they are. And even if someone did grow up in all that extreme attachment trauma, I don't think that they need to know the memories in order to work on that trauma. We already know it was bad just from the attachment viewpoint. So if you're new to me or new to the channel, welcome. If you like this video, feel free to hit some of the buttons on the screen. You can't mess with any of the buttons. And if you feel like these videos are helpful to you and to your recovery, you can consider supporting the work that goes into these videos over at my Patreon. I do not take on any paid third-party sponsorships on this channel because I think it mucks things up for the viewer. And in addition, you can go to my website to do some childhood trauma e-course work that I offer there, including a recent webinar on shame that discusses working with shame triggers through an inner child exercise called dialoguing. You can also get in touch with me through my website, and you can connect with me at my Instagram or my TikTok, and I will have all the links in the description of this video. So as a reminder, as trauma survivors, we struggle with knowing what's healthy and what's not, and we often second guess our experiences and our intuition. Childhood trauma is really trauma to our perception. Like, we don't trust what we already know about our families because we don't have a frame of reference, and clients need a lot of help with that. It's almost like as survivors, we start the healing journey as if to say, like, it was my family, it was my experiences, my life, but what do I know about it? This is helped by exploring what a healthy family system is like and getting some psychoeducation and some validation about toxic family systems, which I try to do a lot in my videos. So clients also tend to think if they can't fully recall a chain of events, then they don't have a case for how bad it was, or what their parents were like, or worse, that they're not going to be believed. That kind of stuff breaks my heart. And as a side note, it's important to think, if you're a therapist watching this, to be at least aware that if clients don't remember their childhood, it doesn't mean that their childhood trauma is irrelevant. It's important to think, where might they have picked up their survival strategies like fawning, freezing, fighting, coping? Where did their problems of intimacy come from? And where did they learn to deal with their feelings the way that they do? It's important to not rule out trauma because they can't remember childhood fully, but they can list family having significant present issues, especially if the client feels questionable stuff coming up with the family. So let's explore this idea about what clients already know by actually looking at a family system through something called the genogram. A genogram is a family tree of dysfunction. I have all my clients put one together with me at the beginning of treatment to get a sense about what their system was like, past and present. Here is a hypothetical genogram that I put together. And I thought about different clients I've had throughout the years that struggle with
Okay, there's that.
Just like a little side note, I've noticed that, like, just like we were talking about, anytime that it comes down to getting the brass tacks, you have a habit of dissociating,
Yes.
spacing out, not being present in the moment, not really listening. And it's like, it's interesting because that has definitely become one of your notable traits, you know?
Yep.
So let's examine this thing here. What is this?
Yeah. If you can figure it out.
I think it's showing the two different family members. So it looks like we might have had, like, say, dad, a secretive alcoholic, and the mother has like an eating disorder. And so they produced a child that always tried to be a good kid, or acted out, or was always used as a scapegoat. I guess you'll
Yeah.
probably go over more of it. So in your case, you had your mother who was alcoholic. We don't know if she was secretive or not, but I know
Yeah.
some of the stories. I know more of the stories than you do.
Yeah, you do.
Because that's another thing too, is they never talked to you
No.
about anything. Not even in your later years. They didn't talk. Like, they just acted like you became the way you became out of a vacuum.
Exactly.
Like, they didn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
But like, I found out that you were locked in a car and your dad had to come and get you while she went to jail to the drug takeover.
And I had no idea.
You had no idea.
No.
And it's like, I learned all this stuff driving up to Sacramento to your brother's wedding.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's easier for them to talk to a stranger. I was pretty much a stranger at that point.
Yeah.
And then it was to talk to you about that. She never did the work.
No.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things from the AA that she was supposed to do.
Exactly. So she has not even completed the 12 steps, or she
No.
just totally doesn't acknowledge that she did damage to you.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like, even I acknowledge the early damage that I did to our own son by acting the way that I did and allowing my own mother to treat him the way that she treated me.
Yeah, exactly.
And it wasn't until he gave me this really sharp look one day, like, are you going to let this keep happening? That it woke me up and said, oh, this isn't normal. This isn't right. I'm looking at it from a different lens. It's like,
yes,
it's not normal to get biffed upside the back of the head because you don't know how to do something properly. It's like, why are you protecting me? That kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
all right. So
hold on. So you had your mother that was an alcoholic. Like I said, we don't know if she was secretive or not, but we do know that.
Well, she was to begin with, as far as we know, because my dad didn't know for a while.
Well, like I said, and then on the flip side, on the other side, that your dad is conflict avoidant.
Yes.
He even if he does know, he's going to put it to the side of everything and be like, oh, they're going through it, and just not take that to heart.
Yeah, I mean, because there was
not confront her about it.
Because they had my brother to begin with.
Uh-huh.
Then they split up.
Yeah.
After my brother. Which within that time, my dad had another kid that we didn't know about until just recently.
That's a whole other bag of issues.
Yeah.
That child became trans and has a trans
Daughter. Yes.
So it's like, because there was fatherlessness, obviously, in that situation.
Yeah. And then they got back together, had me, and then they separated, 3-4 years in?
Yeah, I guess so.
Something like that, yeah.
According to what you remember, you said you were about 3 or 4
Yeah.
when he left, so no warning.
No.
You know, just again, conflict avoided until
No, I didn't even know what was going on. I just know all of a sudden my dad's coming out with a suitcase and saying that he has to leave.
Huh.
And that's it.
What the hell? You know? And so that produced you, who was like, you had separation anxiety.
Yep.
Big time, you didn't speak out, didn't, just kind
So
of
pretty
like,
much, tied to always being a good kid.
Yeah, right.
My brother was the one that acted out.
Yeah.
The scapegoat.
Yeah. And it's the one that caused a lot of problems, and yet still ends up being one of the favorite ones.
Yeah.
It's like, God. All right, let's see what he has to say about this little thing.
Okay, so I gotta mute.
We should take a look at making one of these ourselves.
With not remembering, but they are able to somewhat talk about the system in a good enough way when we start working together. So here is a family map. Squares are males, circles are females. If a family member identifies as LGBTQ+, we can use a triangle or some kind of symbol that feels right to you. We're looking at 3 generations from grandparents down to grandchildren. The family up on the top left in dark pink had a girl and a boy, and the boy became the father of, say, the client in bold white, who I have in quote, like, tried to be a good kid. Let's call him Ben, and he struggles with not feeling like he belongs anywhere. The mother of that boy came from a nuclear family of 5 in light pink, and they had 3 girls, and the family was just a highly academic, motivated family. That's all Ben might know of his mother's side of the family. There are really no big bells and whistles in this family system. Like, the client in bold does not report any domestic violence or chaos or poverty or extreme mental illness in the parents or the siblings. As a side note, clients who struggle with memory can come from either extremely blatantly abusive family systems, or they can come from the quiet, tricky family systems. Ben's family is what I would call a tricky family so far. So in this hypothetical, Ben reports the mother suffered from an eating disorder, and she had the whole family put on diets or extreme monitoring of calories through a family journal. And the mother was also very distrusting of her 2 children's behavior. In the present, Ben reports his mother calls him just to make sure that he's doing right by his employer just cause. It would feel to me that the mother doesn't see the client's goodness, and I would be taking that in as data. Ben's parents weren't close. The sister acted out, was always in trouble, specifically with the mom. And Ben reports that he was always trying to be a good kid in context of that. Let's say Ben reports that he doesn't remember anything before the 7th grade, but he is able to report these general family dynamics. He says he's at a loss to figure it all out, but he is able to say it was rough seeing his sister and his mother have such nasty conflict in their adolescence, and while they were just trying to be good kids. I'm probably thinking about how Ben didn't have a relationship with his father, who never stood in as a parent because he was an alcoholic. He was absent but there, sort of. And this is how some clients often start, and it's good enough. And all they need to look at was how they were parented, but my clients come in thinking they need to have a cache of solid memories to figure this all out. The client and their sibling grew up in a tricky family with parents who needed their own therapy. Ben might say in session that he's expecting me to say that he's not traumatized enough to see me, and that's an expression of shame that's kind of tough to hear. As a childhood trauma therapist, getting this info in the first session, I would be wondering the following. Could the lack of a present protective father and the mother's obsession with food have been overwhelming? Could that be all part of not being fully in his body as a child and being dissociated and contributing to not remembering? Was the family in some kind of way in this like suspended animation where the parents were almost just like playing house? Was the siblings acting out was sort of a ringing of an alarm about the home life? that her acting out was appropriate given that home life. The sister would have most likely ended up as the identified patient in family therapy, which is infuriating in an abusive aspect of toxic families such as this one. I would also be thinking, was the lack of Ben's memories from early to the seventh grade due to there being no real connectivity in the family, no mirroring, no sharing of experiences? I might ask what a family events are like in the present, and this could be a looks good on paper kind of family or a ships in the night kind of family from my 7 types of toxic family systems. And if Ben were able to say that the holidays or the get-togethers are excruciatingly lifeless or painfully long because the family does not know what to do with each other, and everyone is just kind of in a quiet desperation, what might that be like for a child? And again, this stuff is usually not new. If I ask what a holiday meal is like in the present, Ben might report that the father occasionally leaves the gathering to go drink.
Yeah, you were just asking me, do I remember my holidays and stuff and my Christmases? And it's like, I only remember after when I got older and we were going to Rebecca's side of the family for the Christmases and stuff. We'd have ours, and then we'd go to her dad's house and mother's house in Visalia.
So when you were like 6, 7, 8, 9,
No.
you don't remember.
And my mom always made a big deal out of them. I know that. You know, she was always go
I have
big.
pictures.
And, yeah. But I don't remember them.
So that's kind of talking about being kind of lifeless and non-existent. What about birthday parties?
A couple, because I had pictures to look back on, but I don't remember personally.
You don't remember being there?
No.
Yes, you said dissociation.
Yeah.
I remember, after we got together, I remember we went and had a Christmas, and Thanksgivings, a lot of Thanksgivings with your mom.
Yeah.
And a couple of Christmases, because we'd help put out the houses and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I remember after we got together, I just don't know if you remember that.
I do.
But it was...
Yeah, it was all later.
Yeah, it was a lot later. That was you were,
My youngest ones, though, I don't.
Yes, and that's weird because it's those are supposed to be the ones that you remember the most.
They should have been, yeah.
Because, it's when it's really exciting. And
exactly. That's what I would think.
Yeah. What about around that same age with your dad?
None of them.
So same.
Yeah.
That's really weird. Well, so then you just didn't have that connectivity. It just you were dissociating at those points for some reason. Because those are really big events.
Exactly.
For me, I hated them. There was too much going on. I absolutely, but at least I have
the
an
memories,
emotional response to it. I remember having to change dresses and take pictures in front of the tree and then introduce the thing for the video that was being recorded and say the date and the year. But I do remember the presents that I got and stuff too. But it was just a horrible experience. But I remember it. Yeah. And I can connect.
Exactly.
That.
Yeah.
But so, it's like I said again, it's the total opposite. You don't have anything to relate to.
I remember all of Tristan's birthdays and
Christmases.
Yeah. So it tells you a lot. It's I didn't want to be there.
Yeah. But was it's just maybe because you were being moved around so much at that point, you just couldn't be in a connection.
Yeah, I had so many houses that we lived in.
That's super damaging.
Yeah.
Couldn't
stay put.
You never know where you're gonna be. No sense of security. Obviously, she was living in some pretty shady areas at the time.
Yeah.
Were you with him? Were you with her?
I know.
And when you were with her, it was not good.
No.
So that makes sense. Dissociation.
Yeah. That is for sure.
Drink in the basement, and the mother is predictably super preoccupied with discussing or controlling the food. I sometimes think a family like this for a child is like living in a vacuum where you're in a system, but you're abandoned in that system because the parents aren't emotionally home. That's what I would be thinking in an intake. And I would tell Ben that they have enough awareness and don't need the missing keys of memories to know what's up with this family system. Lastly, the trauma here in Ben's case is about lack of connection and potentially overwhelm as a child due to the parent's stuff to the point of being oppressive and lifeless. Was the mother like an energy vampire about food and the father abandoning him and all that? Ben might describe the family system where I might think it's tricky, but as I would get to know him more, there was often a much bigger picture of the parental sort of mental illness. Alcoholism and eating disorders with severe distrust can lead to some significant pathology. I mean, in the parents. I've had clients be able to report what their family system is like, but they express doubt about how bad the family system was due to the lack of memories, say before the 7th grade, like in Ben's case. Let's do another one. Let's say this client's name is Anne, who is in her 30s, and she is in the bottom with the bandages in the circle there. Anne struggles with intimacy, depression, and anxiety and boundaries, like not putting up boundaries. Anne can report these details about her family in her intake. Like a lot of clients who come in, they know that the family is off, but they, again, might really second guess themselves because they don't remember huge gaps of it. Let's say Anne doesn't remember anything from the divorce of her parents from the age of 3 till about junior year in high school. She also has trouble remembering several moves and what weekend visits with her father were like during the divorce. What she can recall in the present is the lasting question of the father being bipolar due to highly erratic mood swings that lasted days and even as long as a week. She vaguely remembers early violence between her mother and her father. She remembers 2 additional stepmothers, one being someone she really loved, but that person couldn't manage her father and was out of her life in just about 2 years. Let's say Anne also talks about a brother who can't control his rage whenever Anne and her husband have him over. She does recall that the brother getting very violent in her late high school years, and the brother needed to repeat the 8th grade twice due to aggressive behavior. In her present life, Anne tends to try to take care of the brother who gets himself into trouble, and she also takes care of her mother who never remarried and is depressed. And Anne feels immense guilt when she doesn't call her mother weekly, but she absolutely dreads those calls. She feels immense guilt and anxiety about taking care of the brother, who she describes as a time bomb when he visits. And Anne knows that something is up to come in for some trauma work, but she doesn't trust her memory in for most of her childhood. She does say in passing that recently the mother told her that in the early stages of the divorce, she left her and her brother with her father for, say, 6 months. And that was when Anne was 3. I would be thinking that the father's moods or untreated mental health problems are terrifying enough for children to dissociate, shut down, and not retain memories, especially under the stress of being a toddler or a late-stage toddler and not seeing your mother for 6 months and your main caretaker being someone who is untreated and potentially bipolar. Again, the client is able to describe the family and the general history in some way, but the client struggles with the missing memories and feeling like having them would put the whole thing into view, when we already have the whole thing into view in my mind. She may even apologize in that session for not knowing more. So in those 2 examples, which are really like clients that I've had throughout the years, and you might relate to, you can see that the focus on missing memories isn't really all that important. The 2 clients that we've discussed, they have enough to know that in their childhood, they didn't see healthy intimacy. They weren't safe as children, just in different ways. They didn't form lasting memories either because they didn't have healthy adults to share those moments with, or the stress of that childhood caused them to dissociate from the present and think of getting through childhood as opposed to taking it in. When working with their inner child, I'd have them do left hand and right hand dialoguing in a session to get a deeper sense of what it was like for them to be a kid in that house. With Ben, I'd have him ask his inner child, how did you feel about dad? What was it like with mom and food? What kind of kid did you feel like you were? Notice how the questions are open-ended questions. Often the inner child will respond with memories or situations that the adult has been removed from for the years, and that is a very powerful experience. Some clients get it back by simply talking about it over time about what they know. I had a client in their 50s who started working with me, and they weren't really able to tell me much about their childhood, but they were able to kind of tell me, like in one of those genograms. And over the 3 years that I was working with them, more and more memories and more details and situations came up for them as we went along. And there was a process that in the work that I do where I tell clients that childhood will become more and more real to them as we continue the work. By the third year, they would come up with situations and scenarios about their abuse that I had never heard from them before. And also, when we talk about the family systems and compare what their family system was like compared to healthy family systems, that also helps us process and get a greater view of the forest through the trees. In addition, your triggers will help you know what your story is as well. Let's say Ben comes into a later session having really been angry and triggered because their partner accuses of something that he didn't do. Let's say Anne comes in and tells me every time her partner goes on like a camping weekend with the guys, she gets massively depressed and shuts down. Let's say Ben comes in and notices that when he cooks a meal for his partner, he never gauges the portions right. And there's generally like never enough for seconds, and making meals is really stressful for him. Let's say Anne comes in and talks about a toxic male coworker, but I catch that when she discusses it, she kind of talks about it in an emotionally unaffected way where other clients might have made a beeline for their HR department. I'm not judging, I'm just kind of noticing the way that their affect or their triggers are related to their present, or in other words, being shut down. So in those 4 hypotheticals, can you relate to them, but can you also correlate what you know of the person's family story to the trigger that they mentioned? Can you bridge those 2 things or where they might come from? Leave a comment if you think that you can. So I think the best resource is to find a therapist or healing arts person who gets it and can help you process your family system. That's the first place, but I know that finding someone like that is super hard, much less affording them. So when I start with clients, I have them do a genogram with me. I have an e-course that walks you through how to put a genogram together. In addition, there are 3 other e-courses on my website that are helpful in processing childhood or the family system, including a talk I did on shame that includes a worksheet on how to do the inner child dialoguing. You could also do some journal writing about what your family system is like in the present to begin with, and think working backwards about the system on the whole. Here are some questions to reflect on, all based on the present. And again, families without significant therapy work don't really tend to change over the years. So here are the journaling prompts. How does my family respond when I question abuse or problems? How did my parents do with their partnerships and intimacy in life? Does my parent or parents really see me for who I am? How and why to that? Do they show up for me in ways that I need? Who shows up for who more? The how and why to that, like write about it. Does it feel like I'm an alien in my own family system? How and why? How does my family system manage present conflict? Is it mature? Is it healthy? How does my family talk about my childhood? Are they defensive, or do they not remember themselves? Or do they assume normalcy because basic needs were met, like the food, education, shelter stuff? Does your family say stuff like, you were fine, or you were always the problem, or I wish I'd never met your mother, or what do you want? I had to work. What do you want? I needed grandma's help. That's the kind of stuff you might be looking for in this journaling writing about that last question. The memory issue is a big issue, but when clients get to me, I know we'll be able to process in a good enough way to get a good enough picture of what it was like for them. And I think you too can process and get a good enough picture as well. We just kind of have to let go of we're kind of attached to this idea that we need these memories, which again isn't true. We're not totally stuck if we can't remember the situation or the details. Check out the description to this video for more additional notes that were kind of like too much to include on the issues of memory. It'll be the description of this video. And I hope that this video was helpful to you guys. And as always, may you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be joyous. And I will see you guys next time. Take care.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, and I think what we pretty much learned on that is that some of the best ways to help your children and to get past it, is just to be the person that you needed at the time.
The best way to heal yourself is to, yeah, be the parent that you wish that you had.
Yes.
Be the adult that you needed at that time.
Exactly.
And to be present in every aspect of their growing up so that they make those good connections and you're getting to relive that through them. Like
yes.
Birthday parties, Christmases, just simple things. I mean, don't like go overboard with trying to like do these stupid material things, but just be present.
Yeah, be
there, talk to them.
Yeah, be there, allow them to talk to you, hear them, answer them, and just, I mean,
if your parents did something that made you uncomfortable when you were a child, don't do those things.
Exactly. Don't do that.
It's pretty simple, but it's really important that we start making better, like raising better adults for the future. Otherwise, there's going to be a whole hell of a lot of broken, useless people in this world.
Well, I mean, just look at how the world turned out for a little while under even the Biden administration, the transgenderism and everything.
Even under others, I mean, there's still a hell of a lot. I mean, like for the past 20 years, that's been increasing.
It has.
With transgenders and all these different ideations, people like literally are not secure enough within themselves to. They have to like make something more of it.
Yes.
They have to be special because they weren't treated special as children.
Well, exactly, and it's like it's
or led strongly.
Yeah.
It's like you can treat them special, but you also have to have like a firm grip on reality too.
You do. And I mean, the way that people are thinking right now is by far not reality. They need to come back and understand the concept of who we are as people and not live in this fantasy world. And I think that guy explained it pretty well with it all, as far as why people retreat to a different way.
Yeah. And a big part of it too is that it's a faithless like community
yes.
anymore.
Oh God,
like,
yes.
That's really dropped off in the past 20 to 30 years. Science overtook everything else, and so faith got kind of pushed to the wayside. And it's like you become such a different person when you're serving, not just working,
yes.
but serving something higher than yourself, whether that be raising children or doing good works in the world, something more than you that like really shapes you as a person.
It really does. It really does. And that's the biggest thing. I did not have that growing up, having any type of. I mean, I knew that there was more out there and I knew that I would find it, but I still did not have it structured from my parents or anything.
Yeah, I worked with animals. I worked with veterinarians. I did wildlife rescue. I did stuff like that, and I think that was a good foundation for it.
Sure.
It's like literally the only thing that saved me most of the time. I think back, it was the animals that saved me in just about every situation.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And my idiot grandmother would sit there and try to tell me on the phone, "Well, you don't need all those animals." And it's like, if it wasn't for them, I'd be dead.
Yeah, I got you.
So it's like, don't tell me that, because if I was relying on you guys, I would have killed myself 1,000 times over.
Yes.
It was hard enough anyway.
Oh God. Yeah, it was.
So it's like I try to incorporate that here still.
Oh yeah.
Animals be the cornerstone of our monastery, and you do good works with humanitarian stuff.
Yeah, I do.
Something I don't understand, but you do that, and that's a good thing to incorporate it to them as well.
Yes, because a lot of people don't understand, and I was homeless for a while, and so I've seen that side and know what is needed more out there.
Faith.
Yeah, faith for sure.
True faith.
And we were just talking about this a little bit ago, and a lot of the people out on the streets actually want to be homeless.
Well, there's definitely more freedom.
For sure.
And that's not necessarily a good thing, because yes, you have the freedom to go do your drinking, you have freedom to go do your drugs.
Yes, exactly.
You have no responsibility.
You need structure in your life too. Structure is very important.
Exactly. it's like I guess that's where sacrifice and service comes
Yes,
into
very
play.
much so.
So
See, and I had freedom as a kid.
yeah,
I had a lot of it.
right,
And that's a big thing. You know, I needed that structure in
Yeah.
my life.
kids crave it. I
Yes.
mean, they really need that because it's like you don't want to be feeling like you're the one with all the answers because you just don't have all the answers.
Exactly.
You're literally incapable of seeing around corners and seeing, understanding the consequences of your actions.
Yeah.
Until you're like 21 years old.
Exactly.
You know, so why? I mean, why people do that is beyond me, and then it comes down to the trans youth stuff too.
Oh, it does. It does for sure.
Like everybody feels super uncomfortable at some point or another. I wanted to be a wolf. There was no way to like change that.
Nope.
You know, and so I just had to suffer and deal with it, and then realize that being put in this body is actually more beneficial
Exactly.
to me and to other wolves. You know, so it's like, but I mean, I didn't understand that until I was at least 25.
Yeah.
You know, maybe even a little bit later, and that's the reason for it all.
Exactly.
But like they crave structure, you know, they crave
Oh
rules.
God, yes.
Like
Yes.
as much as they like, I mean, I've read some comments which like just kind of broke my heart because there were some people was like, this girl knew another girl in high school and they were talking and one was like allowed to go out and party and do what she wanted to do, and the other one was like, oh shoot, she's like, I wish my parents were like that. They're so strict. And then the first girl was like, well, at least they care about you. At least they love
Yeah,
you.
exactly.
You
That's
know?
a big
It's
thing.
like, so they even know even then, you know.
Yes.
It's painful.
Oh God, yeah. It's very painful.
But,
It's all worth it for these guys.
raise good people, raise good adults for the
Yes.
next generations. And
Raise them to know better. Raise them to be who you want to be.
yeah, the great reset, you know.
Raise them to be kind to animals
Kind to people.
and people. Animals first.
Yeah. And to work hard and to
Yes.
serve well. Working hard.
Yes.
And
Serve well.
Play often. Nap often.
Yes. All good things.
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this. It's been a great topic, and we've got two parts of this one that I think are both about an hour 40 minutes. So it'll make for some great content, and if you want to rewatch it, or we'll have shorts made out of it too, I'm sure. So namaste, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.